Welcome to Eavesdropping at the Movies. I'm Jose.
I'm Mike.
And today we have a special guest, Stephen Glass.
My brother.
Yes, who is crazy about this film. So maybe we should start with you, Stephen. Why is this such a passion for you?
This is the fourth time I've seen it now. I just really like being there. I was a bit unsure for about a week after I saw it the first time. And it was one of those, as soon as you saw it the second time, it just sort of all made sense. I just really like these people, and I keep finding them more interesting, and I really like how it feels. That whole 2 hours. I would like more of it, but, it's...
Well, we might get poisoned first.
Yeah.
Mike, what did you get out of seeing it the second time?
I'd forgotten, obviously the first time I saw it, I'd completely forgotten everything that happens before he meets Alma, where it's actually setting up his life.
Yes.
Because it was only on the second viewing that I realised that Alma is one of a series of relationships that he's had with muses stroke romantic partners.
Yes.
Because you see one at the start, and he says, no more squidgy stuff or something like that. And she says, you never told me that.
No more stodgy stuff.
No more stodgy stuff.
And then the first thing he's eating when Alma's at breakfast is exactly the same pastry, and it's
right.
That's
this
right.
is kind of how he works.
But then she also says, you never told me that. Maybe you told someone before me. So that's setting up this thing of, okay, this is a repeated thing that's happened in his life. He's going through these women.
Yes.
Which I hadn't really realised. So that changes it for me. Well, that's my fault for not really picking up on it the first time.
Yes, I picked up on that because I remember thinking that it's the first time that I've seen... Well, not seen, that... It's the first time in a long time that I've heard the words confirmed bachelor applied to someone who wasn't gay. Yeah. And so kind of for me that also kind of implied that he was someone who was in a series of relationships but he couldn't commit, and that was part of his narrative.
This is one of the one of the big points that I'm curious to speak to other people about in the film is somewhere between the first and the second time I saw it. Somebody suggested, and I disagree with this. They went, "Oh, it's a film about closet gay."
Oh, I don't think so at all.
But what I'm interested in, I don't think that's the case, but I do think it's interesting how the film kind of doesn't... It has a very, very small sexual side, and he's a weirdly kind of asexual guy. He has tropes of real masculinity. He drives fast cars, and the moment when she wants to kind of get him into bed works, although for a second he looks really confused. But I think there's an interesting thing about why the film chooses to not get into the sexuality.
That doesn't strike me at all, and that certainly wasn't my impression on second viewing. You get the feeling that he is very sexual, and in fact that he uses his sexuality and his charm as part of the tools of his job, right? That's he's always flirting with these women, and actually you get the feeling that sex is an option, or actually that something has happened between him and some of his older clients. So
the first one especially.
Yeah, so I didn't feel that at all, really.
I probably agree. I think it's one of those things where it's also a very different kind of eligibility. It isn't all about, God, he's gorgeous and I would have sex with him. He is a whole package. He's also a certain kind of brand of Britishness that I think he's probably the kind of Englishman that taught Americans that British is tantamount to gay. You know what I mean? Because it means refinement, and it means
culture, and it means having... But
the fact is, you can have a guy be secure enough that he's a top dressmaker, and he happens to be proper, really straight.
Well, he's not the only one. There are quite a few, actually, though one never knows. Certainly there are a few married ones. What I love this time around, and that I think goes with that kind of... a sense of security and self-assuredness, and having everything his own way, and which on the one hand is a kind of autism. Like the film implies that he's somebody who's on the spectrum, right? Everything has to be just so, everything has to be on a particular order, and that also implies him being closed off in a kind of an internal world. Yeah, so kind of that conversation with his mother and so on, right? I found that interesting, and I found that interesting in relation to the way that Daniel Day-Lewis speaks in a very soft tone. He speaks low, low with a low voice. He almost never raises his voice, in fact, even when he's angry, which I thought was quite interesting. The volume always remained understated somehow.
His voice changes. You notice he gets more he gets drier over the course of the film. Like the start when he orders breakfast is so smooth. Later on, the real difference is you just hear how like abrasive he gets to Alma because his voice just gets, it sounds a little bit worn down. But yeah, he still he can be quiet because nobody needs to. Everybody's quiet around him. Everybody just does what they do. Once the wedding dress gets ruined, these women just. Cyril looks really freaked out almost when she walks in and sees everybody working on the dress, and it's like she doesn't quite get the sense of will that this guy's placed over the house, even though there's something very strange about the way she looks at what they're doing. It feels oddly to me, like, or at least when I see that, it does feel kind of, look at this, they went straight to it. He's put this spirit through the house, and now they just get straight to it. They're quiet, they sew, they do what they do.
What did you think of the dynamic with the sister? Because that's in a way, an interruption to that, or
an interruption to what?
Well, to the sense that Cyril sets the tone for everything and that he's in control of everything. Because actually, I feel that it's true, but on the other hand, the sister's in control of Cyril.
The sister is
Reynolds.
Cyril.
Oh, sorry.
The sister's in control of Reynolds.
Yes.
And what's the interruption, Alma?
Alma's definitely an interruption, and there's a power struggle over Reynolds.
Well, there's an interesting thing, she is an interruption, but you don't see how much of an interruption the previous girlfriends have been. And what seems to be clear about this one is, Cyril clearly likes her. She says as much. And she wants, and when she thinks that Reynolds is going to throw her out, she wants to impart she wants him to be kind about it, Don't just ghost her, at least actually make her leave.
Yes.
And that's probably not the way she's behaved towards any of the previous ones, right? Alma is different.
Well, she says
Cyril needs a show of strength, and she gets them from Alma. There's that brilliant moment after you've had the first breakfast in the London house, and Alma makes all this noise, and he gets upset and storms out, and she gets the last word in and says, "Look, I still think he's too fussy." And there's the next breakfast scene. Alma is completely quiet as the rest of them. And you start on Cyril, and she looks around as if she's going, I need to do the same thing. And what she does is mention Barbara Rose. And knowing that the mention of this is going to piss him off. And she does it, and it's almost like going, look, we can do the same. I can screw with him too. And he's fine. He doesn't need to be treated with kid gloves like this. He needs to be treated like an adult. And she does it, and there's a great sense of respect between the two of them. Right up to the point where she lets him hang himself at the end by letting her walk in, not interrupting, and he says these things in front of Alma that he wouldn't say otherwise. And it's like she owes it to her. Like, they both seem to realise this is a bit ridiculous now. He needs to calm down. He doesn't realise that what he's actually got to is kind of love rather than something that's tearing his world apart.
Yeah, it's interesting, that scene, because normally in a scene like that where one person is listening to another person say something awful about a third person, knowing that the third person can hear, that would be an act of cruelty to that third person. And in this case, Cyril is doing Alma a favour by ensuring that she hears the truth from Reynolds.
I'm not sure about that. I mean, you could argue that it's the opposite. That in fact, she's letting Alma hang herself. That, she could have stopped it. But she lets Alma hear. Now, kind of, that ends up, helping Alma. But actually the intention is to me not at all clear.
Well, you certainly know by this point that Cyril is fond of Alma. That's been established by this point.
Yeah, but this is the moment where he's asking his sister to get rid of her.
Yeah, and to be fair, it's a tricky one, isn't it? Because Alma's threat doesn't look like it's come to bother the Cyril part, which is quote-unquote business. Potentially with this new client, because she's going elsewhere, she's been to another house. But she is back at Woodcock, and she's getting a dress there, so Alma isn't quite... If the difference was, your work's terrible now, all the clients are leaving, it would be very obvious. It'd be much more clear that most of what she's doing is getting at Alma, but it's interesting how they do and they don't deal with whether or not his work improves because of Alma's involvement.
I see it as a power struggle, right? Where initially Cyril has all the power, then Alma comes in and she's disrupting not only Reynolds but Cyril, And actually, there's that moment where the doctor comes in for the first time, and there's like the Mrs. Woodcock. Who's the Mrs. Woodcock, right? So, and I think there's no. It's very clear that Cyril likes Alma, and in fact that they get along. But kind of, it's a thing about power, yeah, and kind of disruptions of power, and who's got the power, right? And kind of Reynolds thinks he's got it, and Cyril knows she's got it, and then Alma comes in. Right, so that's kind of worked through the rest of the film. I think in very interesting ways, actually.
Yeah, I think there was a big thing when The Master came out, and it really it just doesn't seem like the interesting part of that film to me. That it's who's the Master? Is Joaquin Phoenix in charge, or is Philip Seymour, or is it actually Amy Adams? And you sort of feel like for one thing, there's no conclusion. For another, it's far more interesting if you just enjoy the fact that they change constantly.
Yes,
and people have different powers over different things.
I think one of the things that that I certainly want to raise in the second podcast, and not that I want to minimize story, because obviously the story is told through visuals, but one of the things that struck me very powerfully this time around is just how beautiful the film is, like visually, how stunning it is. The Chelsea Arts Ball struck me the first time around, but this time there's that moment where they go from the Alps to the moment where she's descending the staircase into the dinner. Right, and that's just extraordinarily beautiful.
There's a shot of snow falling just to have a really nice transition.
Yeah,
it works because you get the snow and you get the red and the
and then the staircase with the mural behind it. It's just kind of extraordinary, really.
There's also a shot very early on of the first one of the first clients that you see wearing the dress that she's been fitted up for, and then descending the staircase and into a party. And those two shots of descending the staircase are like direct lifts from 40s films, basically. I know no specific one really, but just it's a style of that sort of shot, and it's opulent and elegant, and it sells wealth and class and beauty, and
it reminds me a bit of Suspicion. Like it has a Hitchcock kind of feel to it, really.
Well, I said just poisoning in it, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does.
I said to Stephen right at the end of the film, when the credits come up, because the credits are done in a very deliberately and knowingly 40s style of fading over each other, and I said to Stephen right at the end, this is like Paul Thomas Anderson's version of Grindhouse, the Tarantino movie, where it's like playing on this old style, and it's not. I mean, don't get me wrong, it is
very
not
different.
It's not as sort of gung ho as Grindhouse, and it's making something new out of these stylistic kind of references and foundations. Nonetheless, though, it's building on them quite deliberately, I think, and shots like this really echo. And there's another thing which was something that I felt the first time I saw it, but didn't put into words, is that the film feels like a classic Academy ratio film at points.
Yes.
I don't think it's a standard aspect ratio. It's a little narrower. It feels like.
Yes.
But it's not. It's not full frame. But actually, I was watching shots very, very carefully, trying to look for how this feeling was coming up, and sometimes, particularly in the first half of the movie, shots are framed such that the edge of a door frame in the very, very foreground is positioned at the right or the left-hand side of the screen, or sometimes both, such that you don't really pay any attention to it, and it frames everything else in a narrower way. Or sometimes a shot, a kind of shot reverse shot type setup, someone will be blocking out so much of the frame that what you're looking at is really a much narrower frame, effectively.
The staircase in the house is wonderful for that.
And there's an awful lot of that, and there's also framed with kind of candles and things, so it's not always blocking off parts of the screen, but sometimes it's like the design of the walls inside the house is kind of blue wallpaper with these white vertical, I don't know, like just sort of struts or pieces of wood or whatever they are in between that end up framing the shot. So although the entire shot is still widescreen, a frame is built that is slightly more square within it, and then someone is placed within that. The same is done with door frames and things. So
I think that's definitely the case with the shot of him sat on the toilet at the end. It seems like I don't know. I'm not saying it's this planned, but it seems funny to me that shot, which is so weird, and it's one of those things that you never show. It's one of those that I always find this with Paul Thomas Anderson's films, because you don't know where they're going to get to, and it's really exciting. That there's shots that suddenly sort of burn in that much stronger because you didn't realise, oh, we're now here. This is where we've ended up. The shot of him on the toilet in the country house bathroom, and she's at his knees. There's 2 door frames and they're black, and it looks like you've set up an old Academy frame.
Yeah.
But for the shot that shows us this subject matter, which is so weird, this guy sat on the toilet and they're so much in love, and it seems like I'm going to put something so classical with something that's really kind of stretching this further, and you're going with me, and it's just a really, really lovely shot for one thing.
What I noticed was how much of metteur en scène type of cinema this is. So the thing that really struck me was how at the very beginning, even when they meet, the light is always on him. Yeah, so she's visible, and the image is so beautiful and sharp that it's almost like you see the down on her skin, the little hairs on her face. Yeah. But the light is firmly on him.
I think
and at the end of the film, the light is on her. I don't know if you noticed, but it's like her face that's taking the light, and he's clear, he's in focus, but he's outside of the light. The light is less strong on him than it is on her, and it is almost like a complete reversal that happens just in terms of lighting.
I certainly started to notice that when he's poisoned for the first time, he spends a lot of time in bed, and she closes the curtain to let less light in, and that's almost like seems to be basically when it happens. Then he's on the bed and he's got this 5 o'clock shadow, and he's sweaty and his hair's all over the place, and he's being shot from this very unflattering angle from kind of below him as he's lying back on the bed, and he looks unbelievably beautiful at the start of the film.
He looks,
and this
beautiful.
is the absolute opposite. Like he's been made to look at his worst.
I mean, one of the things
part of
that I loved about the film as a whole, and that reminds me of 1940s cinema, is actually how both of the leads are almost impossibly beautiful. Like, they are beautiful, right? I mean, I think she's kind of one of the most gorgeous presences in cinema that I can remember in a long time.
The more I see the film, the more I think, you get beyond any questions of kind of the weirdness of the kind of Munchausen thing, and you just go, I'm so interested in this woman, and she's so completely gripping.
Yes.
She's kind of mesmerizing.
She's placid and supremely strong, right? And also so open that she gives herself entirely to him, but actually always in this kind of, quiet way, right? Like, I mean, I'd say she was placid, but she isn't really placid because she's so strong, nobody pushes her around. On the other hand, she waits for things to happen. She doesn't get exercised by things, the way that he gets exercised by everything. Everything rattles him, actually. So I think kind of, the film is so interesting in the coming together of those differences, I think.
I like the bit where we mentioned in the previous podcast where he tells the doctor to fuck off.
Yes.
And then she pops in and says, I think it's clear he wants you to fuck off.
Yes.
And I noticed that not only is that continues to be a funny line, but also it's actually done in a funny way where the camera, the shot is composed such that Reynolds is lying on bed, sort of in the foreground, horizontally at the bottom of the frame, and the doctor and Cyril are standing there, and Alma's not in the frame, and she pops into the frame from the right.
Yes.
To deliver this absurd line. It's like, it's not only is it a funny line, but it's actually it's used this kind of hello.
And that's a key moment, because that's the moment where Cyril loses and begins to know her place. Right, kind of, there's been a struggle of wills until now where Cyril's thought that she's had the upper hand. She's called the doctor, she's brought him on, he says fuck off, she repeats fuck off. Cyril is now in a different level in the movie. Yeah.
She has to leave with the doctor.
Yeah,
it's like
exactly.
she dropped a level.
Yeah. So, the primary relationship now becomes between Alma and Reynolds. Yeah. What about the dresses? Because there's been a lot of criticism about the dresses.
What's the criticism about them?
The criticism is that they're ugly.
Do you know what? I do think that the Alma wears one and Gina McKee wears one at the beginning. This strange kind of Snow White dress, which I don't...
With the cape.
Yeah, it has the sort of... I can't begin trying to describe it.
I don't
understand... Yeah, it has a cape as well. I don't understand why that's... Put it this way, it's not to my taste, but I don't know what the
Yes.
taste would be.
Well,
I look at that and I feel like that feels very that doesn't feel like a woodcock dress, weirdly enough. It feels a bit too ornate.
Well, I was just wondering if the film was trying to do something with that, because the thing about the dresses to me is that the color combinations are beautiful. You know, I love the colors, but then other things just feel so off. Like, you know, things don't seem ironed, or the backs seem a bit loose, or I mean, this is meant to be couture, right? So it means that like everything has to be perfectly in place, right? To the point where he goes and takes somebody's dress out because she's not wearing it properly. And on the other hand, the dresses themselves don't seem quite right. And I wondered if it's deliberate or if it's just like a bad dress designer, right? Because kind of, for it to be deliberate would be interesting, because there's that whole bit of narrative thing about that he's losing clients, that things come in and out of fashion. You know, I think Mike and I talked about how really the only truly famous fashion designer, British fashion designer in this period, is Norman Hartnell, right?
I think it's generous to say that we talked about that. I don't know anything about
I talked about it. So, who's not remembered in the same way, and who doesn't have the same fame or acclaim as Dior or Balenciaga or people of that period. So I wondered if the film was doing something deliberate with that, but making him not quite a great dressmaker, not quite a great couturier, right?
I don't know.
Yeah. So
I mean, not to derail it, I just don't know that. I know nothing about fashion. It seems to me that the film is certainly trying to portray him as someone with next to no parallel. I mean, not as a kind of genius beyond all others, but someone on the top level. I mean, royalty come to visit him and get dress after dress after dress made by him.
He's a top couturier. There's no question about that.
Yeah,
it's interesting though how he's not related to the rest of the world, but then it's one of those things that if you wanted to show that, you'd kind of be cheating the way that the story's told. He strikes me as somebody that the reason why we don't hear about the fashion world is because I don't think he wants to be interested in it.
Well, I mean, I don't know. I'm just thinking...
He talks a good game about being strong and I don't need to be reliant on anybody else. And everything he says, the absolute opposite is true. And I think part of him being absolutely fixed in this house is he's terrified of... I don't think he's somebody that could bear to talk to other dressmakers.
Well,
there is a couple
I think he's lucky in as much as the only time he'll notice when that he's not popular anymore is when clearly somebody's going elsewhere. And I reckon the reason he knows somebody's going elsewhere is I think that woman at the end, who he gets pissed off at, is asking for changes to the dress, which he obviously knows somebody else does. So I think he knows other people. It's almost like somebody, if you had a filmmaker that was being accused of, you're clearly like this person, and they went, I've never seen their work, but obviously they're obsessed with it.
Well, he's got this whole conversation about what is chic. You know, I hate that term. I don't know what it means. Blah blah blah. Well, kind of. And all the rest of his contemporary couturiers would have been chic. Dior was chic. Balenciaga was chic. He doesn't have chic, and you could see it in the dresses.
But he talks about that he wants beautiful. He wants it's right because it's beautiful. He wants.
But it's only right because he says so.
And there is a copy of Vogue in the house. Don't forget. Like there's not a complete alienation from the
doctor's reading a copy.
Yeah, the doctor's reading
probably
Vogue.
Why he hates the doctor.
Well, possibly, but it's not total alienation from the rest of the fashion world. He can't be the kind of such a reclusive genius that he can't engage at all. And obviously, he knows, as he said, the fashion designers when the woman says, or rather, when Cyril says so and so is leaving, or he's outraged by it, whatever it is, and he says, who's she gone to? And Cyril doesn't say, but like he wants to know.
I agree. I reckon it's one of those things in the end where what it is we get enough of a sense that he's successful at what he does, so that we can get by and tell the real meat of the story, which is the relationship, because it's not necessary to know that he maybe has problems with the rest of the fashion world. He's successful, he's in charge, that's the thing.
The one thing that did strike me about the fashion, which, because as I say, I know nothing about fashion, the dresses look fine to me. They look like posh dresses, that's all I know. The one thing that did strike me though is fashion to me is kind of, or that type of fashion, it is all about being seen in photographs, and you're seen wearing such and such, and maybe you're being seen on the red carpet being asked by Joan Rivers who are you wearing, or well, Joan Rivers will be taking the piss, but there are a couple of moments where the dresses are touched and fiddled with in a way that's like, you think in my mind these things are kind of trophies, you don't really think about them being actually physical objects that are worn and engaged with. So there's the one point early on where Alma is wearing the dress that she's not a fan of the material, and she's kind of playing with the pleat in the dress. She doesn't like it. And then obviously there's what's her name? The drunk woman.
Barbara Rose.
There's Barbara Rose, who, you know, is treating her dress like absolute crap, and she's wiping her mouth with it and ruffling it up, and there's this kind of physical. And both of these times, Reynolds is very unhappy.
Yes. Well, let's move aside. I mean, my own feeling is that, you know, the film actually, in those ways, to me, also references how so often the dresses are not quite right. Yeah, Alma says so several times. She changes his dresses. You know, there's the dress of that Belgian princess that, you know, you look at and with that wedge and on the bust line. So I'm just wondering if there's something there. But I don't want to talk about it now because we have 15 minutes and I want to get to your feelings about the main theme of the film. Like, this woman has to poison this man in order to get him to lie down, open up, and love her.
This is one thing that I wanted to ask both of you about, because I haven't seen anywhere that talks about this. The actual very, very end of the film, where you realise, like, okay, the whole framing of this is Alma, and it's this very, like, gothic, which I can only talk about really from Frankenstein, but Frankenstein is, you know, one person is telling the story that somebody else told them, Recently they did it with Grand Budapest, right? Alma's telling this story to the doctor.
Yes, that's the framing.
Presumably, maybe, possibly, because he's figured something out or whatever. Maybe it's a confession. And you get to the end, and when you're in this sequence where you see that they're working together now, you suddenly realise that what he's been coming up against and what has been there the whole time is this weird sort of cosmology she has about, I'll see him again. I don't need to worry about this. I'll take care of him, and all I need to do is be patient, and I'll see him again. And there's this suddenly she comes into her own, and you feel like there's a mysticism that's in Paul Thomas Anderson's films, especially you find it in The Master and Inherent Vice, which I really, really like, because I think he's a realist, but I think he's somebody that really enjoys, you know, there's the sort of Rain of Frogs in Magnolia, and I think there's something very interesting about this thing, the way that they deal with curses and ghosts, and you almost feel like at the end what she seems to be is she's this spirit that is in love with him because being in love with him makes life no great mystery, which I cannot figure out. But it's almost like if I can have a routine and that involves loving that spirit, then that's what I do. You almost feel like the mother spirit passed into her because he senses the mother being close at the beginning, and after he notices Alma, he suddenly takes this moment and he's very unsure. And then we're into their relationship, and you sort of feel like she has this very strange way of seeing the world and way of seeing love, and it's this strange spiritual, timeless thing that obviously informs the way she's acted the whole time.
What do you mean about the when you said the "I'll see you again," but I'll see him again?
When she's talking at the end, she says, "Look, if he doesn't wake up this time,
in the afterlife,
I'll see him again in this life or the next life or the next life."
Yeah.
It's exactly like the song that plays. I couldn't help but notice there's a song that plays at the end of The Master, when obviously the Master and Freddie have split up, and they've talked about "I'll see you in the next life," and the chorus is all about new lives. And the song is called "Changing Partners," and it's about two people dancing, obviously at a ball, and they change partners, and it's, "I'll see you again, we'll come round and I'll dance with this partner now." And you go, this is exactly the same thing. This seems to be something about how he sees love, which is, it's actually a state of coming into and out of love, and maybe it transcends time and space, and it's...
Well, I don't know, when she says...
I like it. I think it's romantic. It's very strange. Well, I think it's such a great sweep towards the end.
I think it's very romantic.
There's certainly an element of... There's a real tinge of people who are meant to be with each other no matter what.
Yeah, and yet at the same time it comes with, I'll just be patient because it's there.
No, but also because of what his character is like.
Yeah,
you know, so
he'll find her.
Yeah, and he is predictable. He needs his routine, right? And then what happens is he gets so caught up in routine that, you know, he goes off into another space, and that's when she poisons him, right? That's when he wants him open and on his back and receptive, and then to get well again. She takes care of him, and then he gets well again. So when she says loving him is no mystery, I think that's partly what she's referring to, right?
That's what I think is interesting about the omelette scene at the end, is that there's enough mushroom in there to kill him. It's like she's going, you either prove now that you're properly strong and you'll figure this out in the next 5 minutes before you eat this and die, or I'm not worth your time anymore. Now I'll actually leave, Because midway through the film, she doesn't leave.
No.
She sticks around and she sort of thinks he's worth the time to
yes. I love that
settle
scene.
him down again.
I love that he knows, right? And he does it, which is another kind of romantic gesture, right? She's willing to die for him. He's willing to die for her.
He smiles when he figures it out,
Yeah.
and you're like, the audacity of it so appeals to him.
And it ties in with the other themes of the film, of hiding things and the lining of clothes. Yeah, that kind of, that words or images have a mystery when they're next to you or something. Yeah, that they're hidden but there, right? So.
But it's also a thing of he has a dialogue. You mentioned this, did you not? He's dialoguing with himself.
Yes.
Because he sews, and she takes out the never cursed.
Yes.
Which seems to, and then next scene is where she crosses over with the mother ghost, and you're going, it's kind of right there. It's not like the thing isn't complicated, but he gives you things in a very clear way.
Yes.
Look, there's a ghost of the mother, and now his girlfriend walks in.
There's certainly a fairy tale aspect. There's a real fairy tale thing hanging over, and there's partly the superstition aspects and the idea of being cursed and the ghosts. There's also, it's funny that you said earlier about a couple of the dresses looking like Sleeping Beauty dresses, because I thought there's
Or Snow White, whichever one it is.
Oh, Snow White, sorry. But between Alma and Reynolds, it's Beauty and the Beast. She's invited into his house, and there's I mean, I don't remember most of Beauty.
Yeah, he's a proper kind of prince that was like given everything, and now he's an asshole.
And also, I mean, poisoning is in every bloody Grimm Brothers tale.
Yes.
Well, he literally goes to the countryside at the beginning and finds this woman in the countryside who like comes back to the city and goes, "All right, I'll bring proper logic and like proper wisdom. I live in the woods, and this is how we do things. We have spells, and I'm going to curse the bride to get rid of her. Like, you're mine. If you played with this, and now you'll get it."
Yeah, it's a thing of words have power. The thing of don't wish a bride good luck, whatever it is.
Yes, and she wishes.
It's a magic spell, right?
I think there's definitely that element, which is what makes the film seem like like one of those 1940s Gothic films, like Suspicion, So not haunted house Gothic. But previous wife poison Gothic.
Yeah,
it's really confident and audacious and that sort of thing, and I really respect that.
Yes,
like, it's one of those. It's one of the things that I like about Christopher Nolan as well. Although it's handled very differently in Nolan films. I think he doesn't have the deftness of touch in Interstellar when he has what's the toothy woman?
Jessica Chastain.
No. The one who's Catwoman.
Anne Hathaway.
When he has Anne Hathaway say, she literally says like the other variable is love, and love is a constant in the universe. You're like, fuck it, I get this, okay, but it's so earnest, and I really love that. Someone really putting themselves on the line and opening themselves up in their art. And I think that's because when you do that, like, it becomes very easy for people to stab you where you're really vulnerable. And I think Phantom Thread really feels the same way, although obviously everything that it's doing in that respect is handled so much more deftly, and it's less kind of obviously easy to mock. But maybe that's why I love Nolan slightly more, even because when someone is that clumsy, I really respect that.
We have 5 minutes, so let's move the discussion on from Nolan and talk about the sound.
There you go.
Well, it's one of the things that everyone's mentioned about the film.
Does that include the music?
Sorry?
Does that include the music?
Yes. No, I'd like to discuss the sound, the absence of sound, and then kind of the score, yeah? So I think kind of it's all incredibly interestingly used.
Go on.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, obviously, the first thing that struck me was, that sound is made humorous, right? So making everything seem too loud at the beginning and the way that it irritates someone, yeah? And then kind of next when she's doing the toast, it's no longer sound. Then later on in the film, you get the sound back just, so she can needle him, right? But then there are moments at the Chelsea Arts Ball where the sound just kind of leaves, really,
It's a really graceful thing, and I think it's part of what lends the whole thing. Inherent Vice has a similar thing where enough is dealt with in a very gentle way where you don't realise that's what's making the whole thing feel a little bit... Dreamlike's one of those really horrible words, but for the purposes of conversation, dreamlike. Same thing when he goes to the country at the beginning and he's speeding along in the car and you go, that's a sound thing.
Yes.
But it's just this very sort of soft piece of piano music that's playing. And it's really nice to play those two against each other.
That's right.
I love that at the Chelsea Arts Ball when the New Year's party, once we're in it and walking through it, it goes quiet, and the Alma theme plays.
Yes.
And then he goes and takes her.
Yes. And you were like moving your fingers along with the score through quite a lot of the film, I noticed, Mike.
And that's because a couple of the themes are, I've been listening to the soundtrack a bit. A couple of the themes are really memorable. The House of Woodcock theme, the Phantom Thread theme. Phantom Thread theme comes back in sort of 3 or 4 different versions. There's a strings version, a piano version, and a full orchestral version. And that's during the omelette scene towards the end, it comes in with the huge dramatic orchestral version that's played twice. The one that feel like, oh my god, like things are happening, and it finishes, and it's immediately followed by the much softer piano version, like. And this is at the time that he's worked out that Alma is the one who poisoned him and that she's going to do it again. And so this dramatic moment of realization and confrontation you feel is going to happen. Because the scene is almost entirely wordless. It certainly is for a long, long time. And it's just done through looks and cutting back and forth between the two of them. And so the music is huge and dramatic. And then when it comes in with the softer version, that tells you everything you need to know about how Reynolds is going to respond to this now. Like it becomes a thing of love rather than confrontation, and it's done through the theme of the film being played in a different mode. And
the really great bit where you go, this is one of the things that I love about Paul Thomas Anderson. It's like he's got real taste and grace and delicacy. Is you get that big version that sounds like the start of Barry Lyndon with the kettle drums, and that's happening when she's frying the butter and everything's bubbling up, and then she pours the eggs in and the pan goes quiet and the music goes quiet, and you go, that's just great, like filmmaking that goes quiet, and it's a really nice moment to punctuate the whole thing, and the kitchen's going to get quieter, music comes down, and then everything gets very delicate. It's like that kind of stuff is just, that's somebody that is looking at what they're looking at and is just very gentle about and delicate about knowing how to change the mood of a scene. I just think it's really good filmmaking. The
first time I saw the film, I thought what I've seen a few people write about music, which is basically that it's a little heavy-handed. It underscores a vast majority of the film, or certainly a vast majority of kind of big moments, I suppose. That's what I felt the first time, just because it's so noticeable and it's got themes that you recognise, and that so you pick up on it. But the second time I watched it just now, I thought, no, that's just... I want it... Actually, it is kind of lush and it is big at points, but that's exactly what I want, And it's... You can luxuriate in the music. And it's a really beautiful score. There's some real creativity in the music and the way that it's played and the way that notes kind of linger or repeated. The kind of sort of thing that happens with the piano is gorgeous and enticing and weird and...
Okay, we've got only 2 more minutes.
She's been counting down
can I ask
fucking Alex Ferguson.
Yeah.
Nobody's talking about the Barbara Rose section, and I love the Barbara Rose section. What do you think of Barbara Rose? What use is Barbara Rose? And that section with Barbara Rose and her wedding and the press conference.
I think she's based on the Woolworth heiress. It was also Barbara something.
Hutton. I've heard of this.
Yeah, that's right.
But I don't.
So it was Barbara Hutton who married Cary Grant, and then I think she also married Porfirio Rubirosa or some one of those. Yeah. So I think that's definitely meant to kind of connote her, and she was like one of the richest women in the world, and and she had problems, and yeah.
But what do you think of it? You're wasting your 2 minutes.
That section, the section, him getting pissed off and then taking the dress.
I think the film is a bit cruel to her, or the moment where they take off the dress feels to me too cruel. So I think the film is actually kind of a bit empathetic to her. There's that bit in the interview section where they say, kind of, what does he see in you? And she says, respect, I think. Sincerity. Right. So, which kind of, in a way, touched my heart, really, because, you could see what he saw in her was like the millions in her bank account, right? But what she hopes he saw in her is sincerity. So on the one hand, the film treats her sympathetically, but on the other hand, makes her like a little bit the object of...
Oh, she's a figure of fun.
She's funny.
She's a drunk, and she's, kind of not the greatest looker, with the best will in the
Which
world.
is the interesting thing is that you
Yeah.
have a character come in who, what if there's a woman, if women are here to be dressed, what if there's a woman that isn't considered attractive and she's having such a hard time with it?
Yeah, but I think that you're right to say that the film actually treats her for the most part, I think, with a certain amount of tenderness or empathy. Like I'm thinking of the shot from far away when she gets drunk at the dinner, the wedding, and she collapses onto the table. Like, I felt bad for her. And actually, at that point, Reynolds and Alma they're acting like fucking mobsters.
Yes, they are.
You know, and they are not sympathetic at that point.
Yes.
Although it ends up being kind of entertaining and interesting that this energizes their relationship and they make out.
Yes.
Like it's still not. You're not really on their side at that point.
Yes.
I think, or you shouldn't be.
Yeah. No, and I think that kind of solicitation of that change in perspective on the characters is really beautifully done and very complex and very characteristic of the film, actually.
It's done really nicely over that question of what happened about, can you tell us about selling visas to the Jews during the war?
Yes.
And they literally put in, it feels like it's really simple sound design. Over a shot of Alma, they literally have someone go, visas, Jews, and you're like, it's right there, something's going on.
Yeah.
She's not quite gangster. That feels a bit much. There's something there that says, you actually don't deserve this dress. There's a weird relationship both of them have with money. She's obviously come from Eastern Europe, or from Europe.
No, I think she's meant to be an American heiress. The thing about
I mean Alma.
Ah, yes.
And the fact that the two are so uncomfortable, something keeps creeping into my head about the point of them having a kind of immigrant background, because he has this weird...
clearly does. Right?
Alexander McQueen is a dress designer who had the same thing. Like, he had such disdain for the upper class, and yet they're the only people who are going to buy what he made.
Yeah, well,
and it's a weird paradox you put yourself in, where you can just live angry and be creative, but
or
you're kind of punishing yourself. Yeah.
Anyway, we have to wrap up now, Mike.
Yeah. Oh, we've gone 2.5 minutes over, Jose. Whatever are we going to do?
I've got to cook.
Do you want an interesting bit of trivia before I go? Anyway, since you mentioned sewing, I was reading about Alexander McQueen a while ago, because there was an exhibition in London.
That's
the story goes that he either sewed or wrote in biro. He was working on the lining of a coat for Prince Charles. He was an assistant, and he wrote, "I am a cunt." A penis.
I heard that.
You've heard this, right?
I have heard that, yeah.
Maybe that's where they got the inspiration.
Do you think that Prince Charles has found that coat?
It's probably just a story.
It's probably real, himself, actually. But anyway, one of the things that we should probably end up by saying is that the film is very much worth seeing. Yeah. See it, and kind of, put some effort into seeing it. It repays the effort, and it's kind of disconcerting that these great movies have been playing for so little time. So today we had to go see it in the middle of nowhere in the Birmingham International Airport to actually be able to see a second screening, right? It's already not playing the major cinemas in town. So, if it is showing around, you do make an effort to see it.
Yeah. Or, download a screener illegally.
Okay, thank you very much. Let's go.